In 2025, while we debate politics on social media, 25 million North Koreans live under a regime where even family names can become forbidden overnight. Today, you'll hear from the husband of Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong-un's sister, once the second most powerful person in North Korea. He'll reveal how his wife was purged by her own brother, how their family name was erased from existence, and how he escaped with his children across frozen rivers while secret police hunted them. This is a first-hand account of power's cruelty, at the heart of the world's most isolated dictatorship. If these stories matter to you, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us bring these untold stories to light. Together we can be a voice for those who cannot speak. A storm of blood has begun to blow in the heart of North Korean power. I am the husband of Kim Yo-jong, the sister of Kim Jong-un. Right now, I am in South Korea with my children. I stand here for one reason only: to reveal the truth that my wife, Kim Yo-jong, was purged by her brother, Kim Jong-un. Once the second in command of North Korea, commanding the world, my wife was consumed by the monster of power, even her own blood. Why did my wife, who was once the second in command of North Korea and the closest blood relative to Kim Jong-un, suddenly become a target of purge? And why has her name become taboo even within the household? Who was behind it? And what terrible things happened in the Pyongyang mansion? I will tell you that story now. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe and like it. Your attention gives strength to deliver the true stories of more North Korean defectors. The harbinger of that terror began in a strange and chilling way. At some point, my wife's name disappeared from our home in Pyongyang. Just yesterday, the contact officers from the party organization and guidance department, who used to bow their heads and flatter her as Comrade Yo-jong, suddenly barged in without any notice. They came in boldly like an occupying force, forcibly confiscating all direct telephones and external communication equipment in the house. Their eyes were not the usual politeness. They sternly warned me as if I were a criminal. From now on, do not even mention my wife's name within the house. From now on, refer to her simply as that person or that lady. Anyone who calls her by name will be considered a challenge to the party. Such a cold command was given. In North Korea, if you say one wrong word, not only you, but also your young children can disappear without a trace. I had a gut feeling then. That irreversible ruin was coming to my wife and our family. The scenery outside the house became even more ominous. The seasoned bodyguards who usually followed and protected my wife, like a shadow, were quietly replaced in just one day. Replacing them were secret agents from the Ministry of State Security, with fierce expressions I had never seen before. They surrounded the house in layers and began monitoring our every breath. My wife spent more time sitting on the living room sofa, staring blankly out the window. Her once confident and domineering demeanor was gone, and she became extremely anxious, biting her nails as if standing on the edge of a cliff, especially as rumors of a fierce conflict with Kim Jong-un's wife, Ri Solju, spread among Pyongyang's high-ranking officials. The atmosphere in our household turned as cold as a winter ice rink. Watching Ri Solju arbitrarily change the route to our children's school and concentrate elite security personnel only around her daughter, Kim Ju-ae. My wife had to bite her lips until they bled to suppress her anger. I had to force a smile in front of the children, pretending nothing was wrong. But inside, I had already turned into a blackened lump of coal. The increased surveillance by the suddenly increased security personnel, the heavily sunken atmosphere at home, and Kim Jong-un's capricious ruling style combined to narrow my wife's position day by day. My wife sent several documents requesting a meeting with her brother, Kim Jong-un, but all that came back was a cold disregard. The marshal is busy. Wait. Now, thinking back, that glamorous Pyongyang mansion was already a giant prison, without bars, confining our family. Is power so ruthless? Faced with the cruel reality that even the name of my only sister was made taboo, I, as the head of the family, had to make the final decision. This story is a bloody testimony that I experienced myself, and I denounce to you that in North Korea, having one's name erased means death. The night in Pyongyang was quiet, but the study in our house was like a powder keg about to explode. One night, my wife roughly grabbed my hand and locked the study door. Her fingertips were trembling and her eyes were filled with An indescribable, desperate fear, whispering in a trembling voice, as if aware of the bugs that might be installed in every corner of the house. She pressed her lips to my ear. "Honey, my brother has completely changed. No, that woman has completely blinded my brother's eyes and ears and is trying to kill us." The woman my wife was talking about was Ri Solju. Ri Solju was not a woman who was simply content with being the mistress of Pyongyang. She had long been preparing a meticulous and cruel trap to eliminate my wife, Kim Yo-jong, who was the biggest obstacle and received her brother's trust in order to solidify her daughter, Kim Ju-ae, as the successor. Ri Solju poached or threatened the key military officials under my wife's management, constantly placing fabricated reports on Kim Jong-un's desk, claiming that my wife was secretly forming a private organization and plotting a coup in case of an emergency. At first, my brother Kim Jong-un seemed not to believe it. But as Ri Solju presented fabricated evidence, his suspicion of my wife grew. My wife had to shed tears of blood as she watched the unjust process of her youth and loyalty to her brother being instantly transformed into treason. Holding my hand tightly, my wife added in a low voice, "These days, we really need to be prepared for the worst. We must not trust anyone." The word worst, from the mouth of a powerful person in North Korea, is never a light assumption. It was a sure signal that the messenger of death had already crossed the threshold of our house. My wife went to her brother's office several times to clear up all misunderstandings, but the Secretariat officials, under Ri Solju's influence, blocked her way with an ironclad stance. Behind the mechanical response, "The marshal is tired. Come back later," there were always the mocking gazes of Ri Solju's cronies. My wife realized then she was no longer a beloved sister, but had become trash to be disposed of, threatening her brother's power. Holding my wife's trembling hand, I begged her to please lay down all her power and take the children to the countryside. But the logic of power was so ruthless. The more my wife tried to step back, the more tightly Ri Solju tightened her grip. Every time we heard reports that the close-knit officials my wife trusted and relied on were being dragged one by one to the underground interrogation rooms of the State Security Department, tortured and forced to write false handwritten statements betraying my wife. Our hearts sank. My brother is trying to kill me. No, he has already decided to kill me. At my wife's despairing words, cold sweat ran down my back. The monster called power had created a ruthless reality where even a brother could not call his only sister by name. And now, as the head of the family, I had to make a decision at the crossroads of death or escape. The conflict between Ri Solju and Kim Yo-jong had now escalated to a head-on collision that could no longer be hushed up among the Pyongyang elite. The decisive turning point of the incident was the issue of personnel authority. Ri Solju had quietly purged key military officials, whom my wife had carefully managed for a long time, by labeling them as corrupt and having a disorderly private life. This was not a simple personnel matter, but a clear declaration of war by Ri Solju to isolate my wife, by cutting off her limbs one by one. My wife could not contain her anger and tried to go to her brother to protest strongly, but all she faced there was Ri Solju's cold and arrogant smile. "Aunt, please stop meddling in state affairs and take care of your household. That is how you help the marshal." Ri Solju's mocking words tore my wife's pride to shreds. Ri Solju instinctively knew. She felt the fear that if she left Kim Yo-jong, who was gaining control over the military, and the people under the pretext of Baekdu bloodline, as she was, the successor's seat that her daughter Kim Ju-ae should occupy would disappear forever. She cleverly packaged every little action of my wife as a plot for usurpation. The commemorative photos taken by my wife during her inspection of military units with soldiers became evidence of personal worship and formation of a private organization, and the party policy directives issued by my wife were reported as an act challenging the marshal's sole leadership authority. Kim Jong-un, blinded by Ri Solju's sweet, yet poisonous whispers, began to see his sister, who had devoted her life to him and taken on all the dirty work, as a traitor. From some point on, Ri Solju began to arbitrarily interfere, even with the security of our children's way to school. Under the pretext of security vulnerabilities and danger, she dismissed all the loyal bodyguards who had protected our house for years and replaced them with State Security Department agents who received orders from Ri Solju. This was not protection, but clear surveillance and house arrest. The children, unaware of what was happening, had nightmares every night. Seeing the fierce, unfamiliar faces surrounding the house, my wife sat on the living room sofa, holding a receiver that no one answered, and madly dialed the number. But all that came back was an empty dial tone. The despair of my wife, who had become a transparent person in the heart of power in just one day, drove even me, who was watching from the side, to madness. I shed tears of blood while enduring each day in between. The war between the two women had now become a cruel game of survival that could only end with the complete destruction of one side. Whenever Ri Solju appeared at large-scale events with Kim Joo-ae, she deliberately left my wife's seat empty or pushed her to the corner. This was a public humiliation that announced to the world and the people of North Korea that the era of Kim Yo-jong was coming to an end. Every night in a dark room, my wife soothed her pain with alcohol and threw one by one into the fireplace the old photos she had taken with her brother, laughing together. Ri Solju, that woman has won after all. My brother has abandoned me. When my wife's despairing laughter echoed throughout the house, I had a gut feeling that the bloody purge that would befall our family would happen the very next morning. Within the power hierarchy of North Korea, the most terrifying thing is not gunshots or violent words. It is the coldly silent silence of the absolute leader. As the conflict between my wife and Ri Solju reached a climax, the attitude of my brother Kim Jong-un was no longer that of a brother who cherished his sister. In the past, he would laugh heartily and accept my wife's blunt advice as wonderful. But at some point, he stopped reading even the regular reports she submitted and left them to gather dust in a corner of his desk. Next to him always sat Ri Solju with a victorious smile, capturing Kim Jong-un's ear. Ri Solju cleverly twisted the fact that my wife had secretly contacted senior military officials behind her brother's back and reported it. Marshal, Comrade's sister is trying to move the military in anticipation of a hypothetical situation. This is tantamount to coveting the Marshal's position. This report awakened the monster of suspicion that had been sleeping deep within Kim Jong-un's heart. Ri Solju presented the secret documents that my wife had prepared for family protection in case of an emergency as a national policy plan after a coup. Kim Jong-un did not even give my wife a chance to be called in for questioning or to defend herself. He simply excluded her from all public duties, thoroughly ignoring her. At that moment, I realized, in North Korea, the leader's silence means purge, and the longer the silence, the closer the execution. My wife waited for hours in the cold corridor in front of her brother's office, but the answer was always the same. The marshal is too busy with state affairs to have time for a meeting, was the cold rejection. My wife returned home, holding a receiver that no one answered, and sat blankly all day. Even if she wanted to call her brother and complain, "Brother, how could you do this to me?" The fear of that disconnection, where the call wouldn't even connect, slowly drove my wife to madness. The situation was unfolding much more urgently than my wife had imagined. The State Security Department, having received secret orders from Kim Jong-un, had already begun to quietly arrest my wife's secretaries and bodyguards, who were like her limbs. A listening device had been newly planted behind the wallpaper in our living room, and even the lady, who had been helping with kitchen work, had been replaced by a surveillance agent sent by Ri Solju. In that suffocating tension where we couldn't even breathe freely, our family's lifeline was burning away, moment by moment. I made a final plea to my wife. Please give up everything and save your life. But it was already too late. Ri Solju had no intention of stopping until she completely destroyed my wife, and Kim Jong-un had already concluded that his sister was a dangerous rival rather than a loyal secretary. On the night I received intelligence that my brother had ordered a re-examination of my wife's secret records, she burned all her documents and photographs with a determined expression. But her eyes were already filled with the sadness of a broken will to live. I instinctively felt that our family had only a few hours of freedom left, because at the end of my brother's cruel silence, a blood-soaked blade of purge awaited. Before the storm hit, the last family banquet of Pyongyang's elite was held. My wife believed this was the last chance to change my brother's mind. Her hands, colder than usual, meticulously adjusted her attire. But at the head of the event, Ri Solju sat with her daughter Kim Jue by her side, looking down at us with a haughty smile, already appearing as the victor. Kim Jong-un's gaze was now fixed solely on his young daughter, who held Ri Solju's hand, not on his sister. The special seat next to him, which my wife had enjoyed while assisting him, already had a new owner. The incident erupted just as the banquet atmosphere was reaching its peak. As Kim Jong-un sat Kim Jue on his lap and induced praise from the surrounding officials about the nation's future, my wife, unable to hold back, spoke quietly but with a firm voice. "Brother, it's not yet the time to discuss national politics in front of a child. Isn't there a strict order and procedure for succession issues?" At that moment, the banquet hall, filled with laughter, fell into a heavy silence as if doused with cold water. The officials nearby lowered their heads and held their breath, and Kim Jong-un's complexion instantly turned ashen. Ri Solju did not miss this opportunity. She spoke in a feigned, gentle voice, but with a cutting remark like a knife. "Aunt, are you trying to teach the wise decision of the marshal? Or are you jealous because this child is sitting in that seat?" Ri Solju's words directly struck Kim Jong-un's pride. Kim Jong-un roughly placed the glass on the table without looking at my wife, and muttered lowly, "You've crossed the line you shouldn't have in front of my child. Remove that person from my sight immediately." Those words were not a simple order to leave. They were a death sentence, severing the bond of siblings who had been together for over a decade. As soon as those words fell, state security agents rushed in and roughly grabbed my wife's arms. She called out my brother's name in a desperate scream, but Kim Jong-un never turned his head. That was the moment Kim Yo-jong was branded a traitor for challenging her brother's absolute power. In that terrifying atmosphere, I instinctively hugged our children. I was certain that if we stayed any longer, we would all meet a dog's death. My wife was dragged away like a dog, and I hurriedly left the banquet hall with the children. The cold laughter of Ri Solju echoing behind us signaled that our family's fate had been pushed to the brink. Not even a few hours after my wife was taken away, our Pyongyang residence was completely occupied by state security agents. Every item in the house was searched, and the safe in my wife's office was taken away in its entirety. Around dawn, an official from the state security who had secretly communicated with my wife came to me at the risk of his life and whispered with a troubled face, "The marshal has signed the final order to manage Comrade's sister no longer as family, but as a dangerous element. By dawn tomorrow, you and the children will also be sent to a concentration camp under the principle of guilt by association." For the elders, the word management in North Korea means the annihilation of existence. In the empty living room without my wife, there was only the silence of death. My wife, unable to make a final plea to her brother, fell into the giant trap set by Ri Solju and was dragged away to a cold underground interrogation room. "Ri Solju, that woman won in the end." The futile voice my wife left behind rang in my ears like an echo. Watching the state security agents tear down the wallpaper in the main room and sweep away all the hidden secret documents, I tightly held the trembling hands of the children. When the sun rose tomorrow, our family was destined to be secretly executed or meet a tragic end in a concentration camp. Accused of being the relatives of a traitor, I quietly gathered the children in their room and had them pack. "From now on, listen carefully to what your father says. There is only one way for us to survive. No matter what happens, you must not make a sound." The children, already traumatized by witnessing their mother being dragged away, nodded silently in fear, unable to speak a word. I gathered the emergency funds my wife had dispersed in case of an emergency, fake foreign passports, and the contact information of key connections. At 3 a.m., when state security surveillance was laxest, I took advantage of the shift change to climb over the back fence with the children and plunge into the darkness. The fact that my wife Kim Yo-jong had been purged pressed heavily on my heart with immense fear, but as I held the small, trembling hands of the children, I felt only the determination to survive. The image of my wife, who had once commanded the world alongside her brother from the pinnacle of power, was now forever gone. All that remained was the stigma of being the husband of a purged woman and the desperate struggle of a father to protect his children. As I wandered through the dark alleys of Pyongyang, I made a vow. I would never let the precious time my wife had bought at the cost of her own sacrifice go to waste. Escaping Pyongyang and reaching the border was a literal life-or-death struggle. News of Kim Yo-jong's purge had already been issued as a red special directive to all military units and checkpoints across North Korea. The special order to capture the husband and children of the traitor Kim Yo-jong had been given. With the help of loyal military officers who had been my wife's confidants, I hid the children in the cargo hold of a garbage truck and passed through several checkpoints. When I arrived at the Yalu River, the searchlights of the security agency's pursuit team, rushing from Pyongyang in the distance, were cutting through the night sky. "There! Catch those guys!" As the sound of gunshots tore through the night air and brushed past my ears, I hesitated not a moment and jumped into the ice-cold waters of the Yalu River with the children on my back. The river water was so cold it chilled my bones, and the current tried to sweep us away. Thinking of the terror of being caught and the pain my wife must be going through, tears blurred my vision. But I gritted my teeth and swam. When I finally set foot on Chinese soil, my soles were slashed by sharp river rocks and bled profusely. But China was not a safe haven either. The North Korean Security Agency, in cooperation with the Chinese Public Security Bureau, put an astronomical bounty on my head and began a dragnet search. We hid in mountain caves or filthy pigsty sheds during the day and moved only at night, living like beasts. The children's faces turned skeletal from days without proper food, but I comforted them and headed south. In the midst of this, I miraculously met a missionary and embarked on a long journey across the continent. Escaping the eyes of the Chinese Public Security Bureau, we alternated between trucks and trains and arrived at the rugged jungle on the Thai border. Even as I was bitten by venomous insects and torn by thorny bushes, I clung to the single ray of hope that was the Korean embassy and crawled forward. When I finally stood in front of the main gate of the Korean embassy in Thailand, the vehicles of the security agency agents who had been pursuing us from behind were racing towards us, kicking up dust. I hugged the children and ran madly towards the main gate. "Please save us. I am Kim Yo-jong's husband. Please save our children." As the embassy gate opened and sturdy Marines pulled us inside, I heard curses and gunshots from the security agency thugs behind us. If we had been just a few seconds late, we would have been dragged back to that hellish Pyongyang. I collapsed on the embassy floor, kissing the cold cement, and sobbed. The moment I saw the Taeguki flag fluttering inside the Republic of Korea embassy, I finally let go of the mental restraint I had held and collapsed. A mixture of guilt for being a lousy husband who left his wife behind and relief for having saved my children brought tears to my eyes. The Korean government, considering the gravity of our family's status, provided us with immediate personal protection and secretly settled us in Seoul. Even after arriving here, I had to undergo a long investigation under the strict protection of the National Intelligence Service. I recorded in detail all the truths, including whether I was really Kim Yo-jong's husband, and the process through which my wife was purged by Ri Solju. Now, our family is living a new life as citizens of the Republic of Korea. The children go to school and enjoy a normal daily life like everyone else. But when they ask me every night, "Dad, why didn't Mom come with us? When is she coming?" I feel a pain as if my chest is being cut open. There is only one reason why I stand here today and confess all this tragedy. My wife, Kim Yo-jong, was not just a simple traitor as rumored. She devoted everything to her brother, at the pinnacle of power. But in the end, she was just a human being tragically abandoned in the midst of vicious intrigue by a fierce rival named Ri Solju. I wanted to make sure that the people of this land know that in a place called North Korea, family is nothing more than a disposable item that can be thrown away at any time for absolute power. My wife's name may have been permanently erased from North Korea's official history, but as long as I am alive and our children breathe on this land, the truth of that night will never disappear. Sometimes, as I look up at the night sky, I wonder, in that ruthless land where even blood relatives cannot be trusted and purges are rampant, who will be the next name to disappear? I earnestly hope that this story will become a small ray of hope for our fellow countrymen in the North, who are trembling in fear at this very moment. Now, I am about to conclude this long story. I sincerely thank you for listening to the end of my wife's story, whose name has been erased. Although I have included the truth in a dramatized story, even greater tragedies are happening every day in the North. Your warm attention and love are a great strength. Your subscriptions and likes can be a ray of hope for countless of our fellow countrymen trapped in silence. Please join me in ensuring that this small voice can reach them beyond the barriers. Thank you very much for listening for a long time. Stay healthy. Thank you.